In today's review, we take a closer look at the GHAC-98D airbrush from Gaahleri. Gaahleri is a relative new airbrush manufacturer from China and has been offering its products internationally since 2023. The company aims to provide precision tools at affordable prices, unlike the typical $20 airbrushes from the usual Chinese marketplace, which already start to fall apart when you simply look at them. Gaahleri was kind enough to provide this airbrush for review, so let's take a closer look at what we are dealing with here. The package already gives us a glimpse of the essentials, outlining the key features of the tool inside. Retailing at $79, this model clearly targets the entry-level segment, making it an accessible choice for beginners. The package itself is sturdy and well made, ensuring the airbrush arrives safely without any issues during shipping. Upon opening the box, you are first greeted by the usually test spray card. Just behind it there's a note indicating that the airbrush was at least tested before it left the factory. Always a good sign when it comes to quality control. Next we find a quick start guide that walks you through the basics, how to operate the airbrush, clean it properly and troubleshoot some common issues. A thoughtful inclusion is especially valuable for those who are just starting out and haven't yet built much experience with airbrushing. And here it is, the baby itself. At first glance it already looks quite good, doesn't it? The build quality appears quite solid, especially when you consider the relative affordable price. Of course, we'll take a closer look at all the details a little bit later. Also included in the box is a fairly large gravity cup, offering plenty of capacity, ideal for handling large amounts of paint or primer. The cup isn't permanently attached to the airbrush, instead it needs to be screwed on, giving you a bit more flexibility in handling and cleaning. A few spare O-rings are also included. There's also a bit of lube included, intending for maintaining parts like the trigger or needle. Another thoughtful touch that shows attention to detail and something I usually don't see to be included with cheaper airbrushes. Also included is a second nozzle and needle set, something truly uncommon in this price range. This one is a 0.5mm needle, while the 0.38mm needle comes pre-installed in the airbrush. That particular inclusion really made me wonder, could this be the perfect airbrush for beginners? The 0.5mm needle is excellent for spraying primers, while the 0.38mm needle handles most of the general tasks. For very fine details, however, it might still be just a bit too large. On the inside of the box there's also a detailed guide showing all the individual parts and how they fit together. A helpful reference, especially when it comes time for cleaning or reassembling. The trigger feels quite smooth, granted not quite as refined as you would expect from high-end models, but certainly on par with airbrushes in the well, $150 range. As you can see, this is a traditional dual action airbrush. That means you press the trigger down to release the air and pull it back to control the flow of the paint. Personally, I tend to prefer dual action airbrushes as they offer greater control over the amount of paint being released. Beginners, however, might lean towards models with a trigger style mechanism, as those are generally a bit easier to handle and require less time to get used to. It also features a fluid control knob, allowing you to limit how far the trigger can be pulled back and in turn how much paint is released. Yet another detail I normally accept to see on more expensive airbrushes. Let's take the airbrush apart so we can have a closer look at the individual components and see how everything is put together. The cutaway handle isn't anything particularly special, but everything appears to be well made and neatly finished. Between the handle and the main body sits an O-ring, something you accept to find on pretty much any airbrush. The fact that the handle can be removed at all is actually quite important, as it allows access to clean the body from the rear. What I always do at this point is gently pull the needle back a little bit, just enough to protect the tip when removing the nozzle cap. This helps avoid any accidental damage, especially with the finer needles. Between the nozzle cap and the main body, there's another O-ring. That's not ideal if you plan on using lacquer paints, as the strong cleaners required for those can cause the rubber to become brittle, eventually leading to leaks. While beginners will likely stick to acrylics, if you're thinking about picking up this airbrush for spraying lacquers, it's a good idea to order a few extra O-rings just in case. The needle itself looks quite sturdy and well crafted, with a fine tip that suggests a decent level of precision. The nozzle sits securely inside the nozzle cap, but it's not permanently fixed and can be removed. Still, it's not the most convenient design choice, as I'll explain in more detail later. Once again, we see a Teflon O-ring here, which offers only limited resistance to lacquer paints. It's a design approach also found in more expensive airbrushes from brands like Harder and Steenbeck. So this isn't necessarily a flaw, just another indication that this airbrush is better suited for use with acrylic paints. You can take a closer look at the nozzle itself. As you have seen, it can be removed with a gentle tap or a pair of tweezers. Sometimes it even just falls out of its own. Whenever that's a good thing in terms of long-term durability remains to be seen. The nozzle design itself is quite interesting. It features what Gaahleri calls a dual 8 micro air channel system. This is intended to help prevent clogging, particularly with acrylic paints, which are known for drying quickly and blocking the nozzle. That's certainly a welcome feature for beginners, but even seasoned models among you will likely appreciate it. The trigger and leveler guide are looking solid, and the spring has just the right amount of tension for me or for my taste. Not too stiff, not too loose, it gives a nice controlled feel when in use. The trigger itself is nothing out of the ordinary, it simply does its job and features the typical round design you will find on most standard airbrushes. Also a nice touch, a quick connector is already pre-installed on the airbrush itself, making it easy to detach from the hose. This is particularly handy if you own multiple airbrushes and need to swap them out quickly. But enough talk, let's see what this thing actually can do. First up, I'll be spraying Vallejo primer at 2.5 bar using the 0.5mm needle. This particular primer is well known for being thick and tricky to spray, so let's find out if the airbrush is up to the challenge. Well, that worked surprisingly well. The coverage is solid and the primer flows through without any issues. To be fair, only a longer session would really show how well it holds up over time with a thicker paint like this. But as a beginner, you already had an airbrush that can handle something like Vallejo primer right out of the box, and that's a strong start. Now let's try out with some actual paint, starting with Amamic acrylics mixed with a drop or two of thinner. The spraying pattern is fine, not flawless, but that's more likely due to me using too little thinner. With a bit more adjustment, I'm sure it will give more consistent results. Let's try that again on a spoon, and once more we are seeing good atomization and solid coverage. The paint goes on evenly and the finish is smooth, especially considering the minimal thinning. It also sprays Amamic metal colors without any trouble. I'm still using the 0.38mm needle here, just like with the blue paint, and it's handling both types of paint with ease. And one more test, this time with Vallejo Model Air Color. I'm using a light grey shade here, which naturally requires a bit more paint to cover the black primer underneath. But even so, the airbrush handles it without any major issues. Smooth application, no clogging and consistent flow. After just around 10 minutes of drying time, you can already see that the paint has settled nicely, leaving a smooth and even finish across the surface, a good sign of consistent atomization and well-balanced flow. Plastic spoons are of course far from ideal, so let's take it to a real model. Here I'm using 2 mixes of Armor colors straight from the bottle and unthinned. Even so, the airbrush performs without any issues, delivering a smooth, consistent coat across the surface. Before I move on to the final verdict, I'd like to show you how the airbrush can be cleaned and if that process is as straightforward as it should be. This will likely be of particular interest to beginners who are considering this model as their first serious tool. First, I spray the remaining paint into a disposal container, then I run Vallejo airbrush cleaner through the airbrush to begin the cleaning process. Now I remove the cutaway handle to gently pull the needle back a little. I don't pull it out from the rear entirely, as the needle still carries the paint, and removing it that way could leave paint inside the main body. Next I clean the nozzle cap, but to be fair, that's something I probably should have done before pulling the needle back, since it is now loose and held not into place. Once that is done, the nozzle cap can be removed and the needle carefully pulled out from the front. Be sure not to touch the tip while doing this, it's extremely fine and can be damaged quite easily. A bit of kitchen paper soaked with cleaner is used to wipe down the needle, again taking care not to bend or damage the delicate tip in the process. Next, the nozzle can be cleaned using cotton swab, cleaning pipes and a dedicated nozzle cleaner. That last tool is particularly effective for removing the finer traces of paint, but it's also quite sharp, so be careful not to jab your fingers while working with it. The cup can also be easily cleaned using cotton swabs dipped in cleaner, simple, effective and more than enough to remove any leftover paint. The nozzle cap and needle protection can also be cleaned with the cotton swabs, as the openings are large enough to allow for easy and effective cleaning. Now everything can be reassembled and put back together. And finally I spray a bit more airbrush cleaner through the system to flush out any remaining traces of paint, just to make sure everything is properly cleaned and ready for storage or the next use. So let's come to my final verdict. I titled this video with the question of whether this might be the perfect airbrush for beginners making the switch from brush to air, and what can I say? Yes, it absolutely is. I can confidently recommend it to newcomers. For $80 you get a well-built airbrush packaged with thoughtful extras like the control knob. You also receive a second needle 0.5mm in addition to the pre-installed 0.38mm, meaning you are well equipped to spray everything from primer to and varnish to standard acrylic paints. The build quality is solid. Of course you shouldn't accept the finish of a Iwata Custom Micron, but then again, that one will set you back $800. The airbrush is also easy to clean, and the way the nozzle sits inside the nozzle cap doesn't take a bit of getting used to, but I've never been a big fan of that approach, even on airbrushes from Harder and Steenbeck. That might just be my personal preference, but over time we will see how robust this design truly is. In terms of price to performance, you're getting one of the best packages currently available in that price range. It holds its own when compared to other entry-level airbrushes like the Iwata Neo or the Harder and Steenbeck Ultra, both of which come in at around $100 and typically only include one single needle without a control knob. If you're already a bit more experienced and looking for a second airbrush, it really depends on what you want to use it for. If your main goal is spraying lacquer paints, this might not be the best choice, as the number of O-rings can make cleaning a bit more involved. But if you mostly spray acrylics, then this airbrush is definitely worth a closer look. And of course, the best comes last. As mentioned earlier, the retail price of this airbrush is $80, but right now Gaahleri is running a sale on their official website where you can pick it up for just $49. And let's be honest, that's an absolutely unbeatable price for what's on offer here. You're getting a well-built, beginner-friendly airbrush with solid performance, useful extras, and a second needle included, all for under $50. This kind of value is hard to find. You'll find the link to the Gaahleri shop in the video description below. It includes an affiliate tag, which means I earn a small commission from purchases made through it. If you consider picking up this airbrush, I'd really appreciate it if you use that link. It's a great way to support the channel at no extra cost to you. And there's also a special discount included in the description exclusively for my viewers, and it's only valid for a limited time, so if you are thinking about getting one, now it's definitely the right moment. They also operate multiple warehouses around the world, including in the USA, Germany and the UK, so you don't have to wait too long for your order to arrive. And if you prefer to shop on Amazon, I've included links for that as well in the video description, so you can choose whatever option works best for you. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the review. Gaahleri has also sent me a second airbrush, which I will be putting to the test in an upcoming video. So if you don't want to miss that, or if you're interested in checking out my model building projects, feel free to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Thanks again, happy building, and see you next time.